I leave the sports card world alone for one evening and look what happens. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel and good morning. So a rare morning recording for me, actually on a Monday of all things. I took one of a handful of vacation days I've actually got this year that I got a chance to start with. And it seems like the perfect day because there had been some happenings in the sports card world this morning. I was checking my social media this morning and saw that it had kind of blown up with the breaking news. And it's what's in the title. A group led by Nat Turner has basically made an offer, and Collectors Universe, the parent company of PSA, has accepted an offer for $700 million. Basically, it works out to $700 million to purchase a stake in the company. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a screenshot of Sports Collectors Daily with an article on the subject. So let me grab the cab here for you. Here we go. Alrighty. So I'm not going to read you the whole article, but I'll give you a couple of the highlights. But one important thing I want to quickly make a note of, and this is more of a personal thing than anything else, is that to Steve Menzie and the folks at the Virtual Expo, I think your show was fantastic. I think it was well done, obviously an improvement. We did a post-mortem earlier on the channel, which was a lot of fun, but it was at the end of the day and we were kind of tired. My one regret from that post-mortem, even though it turned out pretty well, all things considered, we were able to get something together there. My one regret is that I wasn't able to carry over one important piece. And Steve, if you can hear me somewhere, wherever you are, we got to have a way of recording some of the stuff that was in some of those booths so that we can use it later, because I would feel so vindicated right now. Because one of the things that I said, we were talking about CSG and kind of its potential impact and some thoughts on it. And we talked a little bit about that in the post-mortem. But I did make the point. And again, if I had the tape, this is Pixar, it didn't happen. If I had the tape, I would play back the tape right now of me suggesting that rather than start a new company, to me, it would make more sense to buy one of the existing companies and fix the problem. And here we are. So frustrating. But anyway, let's talk about the story. So, like I said, I won't read you the whole article, but let me give you a couple of the highlights here. So basically, the D1 Capital Partners LP and Cohen Private Ventures LLC will acquire all of the company, being Collectors Universe, outstanding shares of common stock at $75.25 per share in cash. So that's a premium over what the going rate was most recently. And they do mention that in the article here as well. But the big one here is, one of the big ones, is that the move means PSA will move from being a publicly owned company to a private entity. So that's kind of a big deal, because it means that there were already machinations happening. There was already a lot of pressure from the stockholders, and they had already led to some changes. They bought another building. They basically had put in a couple of new board of director members. There were some moves already to start making some big changes at Collectors Universe. And this now is like the next phase in now a big change happening, because Nat Turner is a known quantity in the collecting hobby. He's a major collector, and obviously with deep pockets, he brings in a certain name recognition. So it's going to be interesting, because now you go from having this, Joe Orlando is the public face of, Collectors Universe and PSA and things like that. But at the same time, he's had his issues in terms of dealing with a lot of the backlash from a lot of collectors for the delays that PSA has suffered through and things like that. But regardless, they remain the market leader. So kind of to my point from earlier, so rather than pretend that I'm being clairvoyant, the reason why I suggested earlier that it would make more sense to buy an existing player is just because, well, you take their existing market share. Now, in my mind, if I was going to make a play for one of these, now obviously Nat Turner has the pockets, and with an investor group, they have the pockets to go after the 800-pound gorilla. But in my thought process, I would have thought like, well, you could probably get SGC for like pennies on the dollar compared to some of these other ones, and try to build them up as a viable number two, and then try to compete with Collectors Universe for number one. Or you could try to buy the grading assets of Beckett itself and try to build off of that name brand recognition. Again, you could make yourself a viable, strong number two, and then potentially try to supersede. Well, in this case, you leapfrog all of that and go straight for the jugular, go straight for the 800-pound gorilla and make it a 900-pound gorilla. So it could be a potentially significant move. Again, speculation. We don't know what the big changes are going to be based off of that, but this is a big splash in terms of making a move. So Joe Orlando, president, will continue to lead Collectors Universe. I'm not too shocked that they wouldn't make a big transition, because this stuff like this takes time. And they mentioned at the end, the offer's been accepted. Now this is news, but this won't necessarily be completed until the first quarter of 2021, because this stuff takes time. You got to go through a lot of paperwork and lawyers and all that stuff, and no surprises there. So here is a statement. After careful consideration, we are pleased to have reached an agreement which reflects the remarkable value creation Collectors Universe has achieved through its consistent execution during these challenging times. Well, consistent execution, I question a little bit, but I understand, that you would put this in the statement. Chairman of the Collectors Universe Board of Directors said, this transaction will deliver an immediate cash premium to our shareholders and create exciting opportunities for our employees, collectors, and dealers around the world. That's very possibly true, because it's going to be very interesting, because Nat Turner is coming in as, like I said, a known quantity in the hobby, who understands, comes from buying and spying and trading different businesses for a profit. He does have a collector streak in him, though, as evidenced by social media. You can see he's built himself quite an impressive collection. So if he's motivated to take Collectors Universe or the PSA section of the brand to the next level, they've got a lot of holdings and things that they can do, and they're already the market leader. So if they make some refinements and improvements, and again, speculation, if they focus their attention on bringing that backlog under control, there is value to having a backlog. And that was mentioned in the video by Cardi C, that from a business standpoint, they don't mind necessarily having a backlog. But there's a difference between a backlog, which shows consistent business, and a backlog that gets so big that it almost creates a problem. So if they can make some more inroads on it and make it so that people can reasonably expect their cards to maybe take a while, but not be like ridiculous, but they can still get their cards in turnaround in a fairly decent time period, that's enough, because that means that it would not demotivate people from sending in their big bulk orders. Because if they start being able to better handle the volume, make some refinements to their process, that could pay huge dividends, because then why bother sending to BGS? They're having their problems. Why bother sending to SGC? They're having their problems. Why bother testing out a new player like CSG if the market leader makes some improvements to fix certain problems that they have? Again, that's speculation, but the potential is there for PSA to even expand its market lead, or at the very least maintain it. And if they maintain that and they maintain the resale values, as a reseller, I would have no reason to go to somebody else. And even as a collector who wants to sustain value from my collection, I would have no reason to go with anybody else, because you've already got all the motivating factors, the possible resale value. You've got the PSA set registry. They've got the pieces in place to maintain their market lead or even potentially expand it. So it's going to be interesting, because now the people that it's going to be most challenging for, the CSGs of the world is trying to come in now. That could be challenging for them, but it could also be challenging for an SGC or a BGS who have had their struggles and could potentially lose market share to CSG. But the question becomes if they're losing a shrinking piece of market share, because the big overarching point that I'm making here is, if Nat Turner and his team comes in and they make some refinements, then PSA expands its market lead. If, again, speculating, if they expand that market lead, well, then all of a sudden CSG is competing for a smaller and smaller piece of a shrinking pie. And that's going to be very interesting, because as a new player coming in, that's not exactly a position you want to be in, because now all of a sudden you're facing a situation where the conditions have just changed, and CSG hasn't graded a single card officially yet. And they already may be facing some stiff competition, because the perception of this move is going to be almost as important as the immediate effect. Because the question is going to be now, what happens to people who are sending in? Are they going to be more motivated to send in? Because if that starts to happen, then, like I said, the market share is going to grow even more in favor of PSA compared to at the expense of the other players, including the incoming CSG. Again, speculation, but it's something interesting to think about. That's why I thought it was a story worth discussing. So they talk about the surge in collecting interest, and I will leave a link to the Sports Collector Daily article, so you can certainly scan it and look at it. Let me grab this comment here. As we look to our next chapter, I'm excited to partner with Nat. So this is from Joe Orlando. A fellow lifelong collector and hobbyist whose passion for the collectible space and substantial experience scaling technology businesses, that's key, scaling technology businesses, will help position Collectors Universe to drive continued growth and success in our PSA and PCGS brands. By the way, some people forget, PCGS is the 800-pound gorilla in the coin market. So they've got multiple properties that they own as part of the Collectors Universe umbrella that are in this kind of grading collectible space. So you have to remember that as well. Over the long term, this transaction is a testament to the value that all of Collectors Universe talent employees have built as we transition from a public to a private company in partnership with Nat and a group of world-class financial investors and sports and collectibles enthusiasts. Our customers will continue to see the same level of integrity, transparency, service, blah, 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 blah. Usual marketing spiel for a press release. Just taking a look here to see if there's anything else. Yeah, so the transaction represents a premium of approximately 30% over the company's 60-day volume weighted trading average price, ended in November 25th, the last full day of trading before Monday's announcement. So like I said, this is hot off the presses, today's announcement. The transaction was approved by the Collectors Universe Board of Directors, represents fully diluted equity value of approximately $700 million, and is not subject to any financing contingency. The transaction is expected to close in the first calendar quarter of 2021. Okay. So like I said, like I mentioned a little earlier, it's not going to take effect immediately. But the effect right now is the perception and the ripple effect. So the first thing we're going to see here, and we're going to have to kind of keep an eye out for, is going to be what is the immediate impact to perception of PSA. Now that, like I said, Nat Turner's not taking over today. And again, he's not going to be the only one. He's part of an equity group that is purchasing the stake and turning them private. But there are wheels that have to move in motion. But the question is, that doesn't mean they have to wait until the first quarter of 2021 to have some of these moves internally start to happen. They may not do any big elaborate moves right away because obviously they're not there and they're not fully in control yet. But at the same time, that doesn't mean you can't start making, maybe taking a look at some personnel, start looking at some possibilities and things that you can do, start making plans, basically. The perception piece is, how do collectors respond to this? If they respond favorably and continue to submit in record numbers, well then, like I said, PSA could very easily even increase its stranglehold on that section of the market. And again, that will be challenging for some of these other players because they may lose market share. CSG is going to come in and get a piece of that, a shrinking piece of that pie. And the question then becomes how they respond. And like I said, this is not necessarily the end. From the PSA's perspective, this is PSA and Collectors Universe. That's one aspect of it. How does SGC respond, knowing now that this is an even more formidable challenger than they already had? They already had their uphill battle against some of these challengers. What do they do to respond? Do they look for some external investment to try to enhance their ability? Because there's room there for somebody to solidify themselves as the clear number two. There's still a market for being the big number two, as long as you can sustain enough market share to keep yourself viable. BGS, in the same vein, has all the incentive in the world to try to fix some of what's going on with them, to try to keep a name in that market space. And like I said, CSG is coming in as a fresh player without the baggage, but all of a sudden their strongest competitor just got stronger, and the other ones are suddenly extremely motivated to scramble and try to make something happen. If they can find some additional financing and make their own changes, all of a sudden this competition gets a lot hotter, and CSG hasn't even graded a single card officially. Very interesting happenings. The point I wanted to bring this to your attention if you didn't know already. So there'll be more to talk about on the channel for sure. Last point I'll make here directly pertaining to the channel is that tonight, it's funny because I wasn't planning to make a video today for this or anything like it, but since it happened, I thought it would be worth talking about. So tonight I'm going to be chatting with Matt from Eccentric Credentials. We're going to be doing a live stream, and I think we'll take a couple minutes at the beginning just to talk about this a little bit more. I'll definitely like to see what some folks think, and see what the chat thinks about this. Because again, we won't know for sure what the final impact on this is yet, but it's definitely newsworthy. So I definitely thought it was worth bringing up and discussing in a little bit and get some initial thoughts on. And again, Steve Menzie and folks in Virtual Expo, we need to be able to record some of this stuff because I needed this for posterity, and now you had to be there. It's a shame. But anyway, thanks for those of you. If you have any comments or questions, I'll certainly look at them and reply to those when I can here. And hopefully I'll see some of you tonight in the live stream. So thanks, and we'll catch you soon.